AI as something that's going to take your job. It's not. It's going to complement your skills. AI is going to become as necessary as having internet. I would drive that length, and I did it for like 2 days back and forth. So I was spending almost 4.5 hours driving. But GxP is an umbrella term that everyone uses. FDA really cares about patient safety.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Pharma Daily. So we have another guest on our podcast today. Our guest today on the podcast, Mr. Harsh Thakkar, is a man of many talents. He is a quality auditor, a technology advisor, a podcast host of a YouTube channel named Life Sciences 360, and also he is a CEO and founder of the company named Qualtivate, and he lives in Raleigh, United States. But the best part about of him is that he started just like you and me. He also did his bachelor's degree in pharmacy. And then one day he decided to take the steering wheel of his career in his own hands and drove a long, long journey away and then became a CEO and now owns a company. So I'm going to let the mic open for him now, and I'm going to ask him to introduce himself to all of us and to the audience so that we can get inspiration. All the pharmacy grads and post grads in India can get inspiration from a man like this and become a successful person like him in some future. Okay, so please go ahead.
Thank you, thank you. That intro is giving my hands are like it's giving me chills. So, thank you so much, Mitali, for that intro. And all I want to say is that I've always been a curious person, and I've always loved challenges. So I think pretty much every opportunity I've got in my career has just been trying to follow my curiosity or follow the next challenge and being open and flexible, uh, and having the right people, the right companies who gave me those opportunities, and that's how I'm here. None of this was planned, and I've had my ups and downs just like everybody else, but when I look back, I'm happy of how everything turned out in the last 15, 20 years.
Okay, that is so great. So I would like to start from the very beginning. Tell us about your story from your graduation days. How you were as a student. What was your thought process? Like you told me, you used to do summer internships. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that we find very rare in Indian students. Okay, so what was your thought process at that time? 15 years ago, also you were so enthusiastic about this career and this pharmacy profession. So what were your thoughts in those days?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that I was lucky to be have my father as a role model because he was in the pharmaceutical industry growing up. So I guess being in India, when your parents are a doctor or engineer, they want their kids to sort of follow the same footsteps. So I wouldn't say that I was 100% inclined to be a pharmacy, undergraduate student, but it was more like because my father was in that field, uh, I had seen a lot of things even before I went to the undergraduate school. I had gone to a factory with him on the weekend and seen people on the packaging line and seen, equipment that many other students who don't have that background probably didn't see. So I guess that's how I entered into the pharmacy program in India, in University of Mumbai. But as a student, I was below average. Like I'm gonna just say what how I was, because I was terrible at chemistry. I actually
Okay.
failed chemistry twice, and somehow managed to pass the third time. And that's one of the reasons when I left India in 2007 to come to US. I was originally accepted for industrial pharmacy program. So in part of that master's program was mainly like working in the lab and doing some types of studies on different compounds or like viscosity or pH or all these kind of lab studies. And when I did that for 6 months in US in New York, I felt like I wasn't doing something that I was strong at because I knew my past record that I wasn't good at chemistry. I'm like, I'm not going to do this as a career. Always liked technology, the regulations, that side of things. So even when I came to US after the first 6 months, I stepped out of that program and I went into
Okay.
reg affairs and quality assurance in 2007. And then once I went into that and finished my master's program, that's when I kind of knew, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. And now I'm going to continue following this path. Right. So, again, like I said at the start of this, there's a lot of trial and error, lots of ups and downs, but that's kind of how those 3 or 4 years looked out for me.
Okay. So I just want to ask, how did you move to US? Like, what was your thought process over there? Why did you choose to do your post graduation from the United States?
Yeah. So, actually, there were uh, before I did my undergraduate studies in India, um, I had thought of potentially, studying abroad, and I did apply to a lot of schools in UK. But then I decided that I wanted to do my undergraduate studies in India and get some experience. And because, like, I mentioned to you, because my father was in the pharmaceutical industry, he knew a lot of his colleagues and friends in different companies in India. And that's how, to answer your other question, that's how I got some of the summer internship opportunities.
Okay.
They were not paid
Right.
opportunities. I mean, I got
Mm-hmm.
some stipend and, commuter benefits and, lunch tickets and whatnot, but it was more of like, hey, instead of just sitting at home for 3 months and, playing video games or playing with your friends, just go 2 or 3 days and learn like how stuff is done.
Right.
So I was fortunate, to have, because of my father's network, have that access to those internships. And uh, coming into US at that time, uh, so like I said, before, so I stayed back in India to finish my undergraduate, and then once that was done, a lot of the people from my class in 2007 from University of Mumbai, they were all applying for masters or different kind of programs, and I saw more people were doing it to US versus UK. I'm not sure because I don't know if UK didn't have that many masters programs, or was it more uh, you know not as cost effective, or I don't know what it was, but a lot of my friends were leaning more towards doing masters in US. So I was like, okay, this is something I already wanted to do, so I'm going to apply. And that was terrible for me because I applied to 10 schools and I got
Okay.
9 rejection letters and I got one acceptance.
Okay.
So I still have all those letters with me because, sometimes I like to remind myself that, if I didn't get that one acceptance letter from St. John's University in New York, I probably wouldn't be here, right? Like it's
Right.
it's it's so crazy. Like I applied to a bunch of schools like Rutgers, Ohio State, Long Island University, University of Southern California. These are all schools that were way out of my league, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply. I'm gonna prepare the application. But then I also had some schools that were uh, based on your academic profile and GRE scores and whatnot. So I was working with a counselor, and that's how they helped us figure out which schools to apply. And I actually got to, when I moved to US, like I came with 3 or 4 other guys that I knew in India from Mumbai from my class. So that also helped. Like I was going alone, but I still knew some people that I was coming to US to study with.
Okay. What would you want to tell the current generation who's planning to pursue their master's or maybe bachelor's degrees in pharmacy outside there in United States or any country abroad for the Indian students? Do you have some message? What should they look for or how should they do their preparation?
Yeah, I would say that when I look back at my career, right? Yes, there are different reasons or different drivers why maybe somebody wants to pursue an education abroad. For I think for me, the biggest challenge was, just studying about the regulations and having access to the people. So because I wanted to study that, now I could have studied some of it in India as well, but at the time when I was applying, those programs were not available, in India, or they were very competitive. So
Okay.
that's why I chose to come to US. But I would say that more and more, uh, the programs and the knowledge is becoming easily available, where you have, the graduate and undergraduate students today have way more options than I did, in 2007.
Right.
So that's easy. It's a little bit easier because you have more options, but it's also challenging because then you don't know what to choose, right? uh,
Right.
so I would say, like, before you choose any program, or whether you choose to study in UK, US, or India, uh, there are pros and cons to everything, right? So if you like to be around your family, or you have a big social circle, or if you have people in your family that are not doing, they have some medical history, or you need to be close to them, there could be number of reasons, right? I'm just throwing some out there. Then maybe you don't have the luxury to go abroad, right?
Right.
But if you have, or financial commitments, what have you, right? Not everybody has the same luxury. So I would say consider all those factors, because there's a lot of pros and cons. But at the end of the day, you have to know, those within pharmacy, what are the two or three areas that you really love, working and studying. Like, nobody has to tell you, like, hey, study this. It's just your genuine curiosity is more on, learning those areas. And for me, it was regulations, it was technology. So once you start figuring that out, then you can start looking at the right programs and the right institutions or colleges, that have those, and apply for those. Because, like I said, I learned it the hard way. I came for industrial pharmacy, and I 6 months later quit and moved to a different program, because that's when I figured out that wasn't the right fit for me.
Okay. Great. Okay, so I would want to now ask about your first job, since we've covered all about your education. How was your first job? And I'm not sure if you want to use your Fifth Amendment Act, you can. But how was your salary in your first job?
Oh, it was the minimum wage. I don't remember. It was probably,
I ask that to every guest because just this platform, the Pharma Daily, is for the audience who is from pharmacy, like maybe
hmm.
graduates, postgraduates, or fresher students, and to
Yep.
make them realize that anybody who's now at 15, 20 years of experience and is sitting at a very designated place still started from a very low and a very bare minimum salary range. So that is what I want to
Hmm.
cover on the show. That's why I keep on asking everybody, well, how was your first job like? How were your hardships? What were the difficulties? What were the number of hours you had to work? And how much did you have to work? So how
Yeah,
was your
yeah.
job?
So
Yeah.
yeah, so people that know me, from my college days, or
Mhm.
know like how I started. So I graduated in 2010, from St. John's University in New York, and my first role was an internship, in regulatory affairs, regulatory compliance, and that was at, Dr. Reddy's, which is a generic Indian pharmaceutical company. And that was also because of, uh, you know like, people that I knew in India. So what had happened at that time was, after I graduated, my neighbor, so where my parents were staying in India, so my neighbor at that in that apartment complex used to work at Dr. Reddy's in India, the husband and
Okay.
wife both.
Okay.
So just, with casual conversations, they were always checking in with my parents. Oh, did Harsh graduate? Like, what's going on? And my parents said, "Oh, yeah, he's graduating, in 2010." And my parents came here to US for my graduation. And then he said, "Oh, if he wants to do an internship in reg affairs, he can do it for 6 months or something like that at Dr. Reddy's in New Jersey. And I can, put in a referral or recommendation. And it would more be like a learning. It's not a job, but it will be a paid internship." So again, at that time, I had just graduated, so I was like, "Yeah, this is great. I'll do it." But I was in New York, and the location, of Dr. Reddy's was in New Jersey, about 2.5, 3 hours away from my house. Uh,
Okay.
I was making probably $15 an hour. somewhere around that range. Uh,
Okay.
and I still remember I had to go I think it was 3 days a week, 3 or 4 days a week, something like that, 20 hours. And I would drive from New York. I would leave at like 4 or 5 a.m. or something from New York, and I would
Okay.
drive to New Jersey. So if anybody wants to look it up, I was in Queens, New York, and the Dr. Reddy site was in Somerset, New Jersey. So if you look up the
Okay.
distance, it's approximately 2.5 hours with traffic, and New York and New Jersey traffic is insane.
Perfect. Yeah, we know. Yeah, of course.
So I would drive that
Mhm.
length, and I did it for like 2 days back and forth. So I was spending almost 4.5 hours driving each
Right.
day, and I was like, this is not good. And
Right.
and that's when one of my friends from my class in St. John's, he used to live in Jersey City, and he's like, hey, why don't you come stay with us for 2 nights, so you don't have to cross the bridge to go into New York and pay, 10, $13 in tolls. You can stay with us in Jersey City, go from Jersey City to Somerset, and then when you're done for the week, then you drive back to your
Oh,
home in New York.
yeah.
So that was a perfect setup, and we were at this apartment in Jersey City, and it was, I think, eight or nine guys in this
Okay.
apartment.
Great.
There was a Domino's pizza right underneath, so we could always get, pizza whenever we wanted. And we literally had a ping pong table in the living room of this apartment. And every
Okay.
evening we would all come from, some guys were doing PhD, some people were doing internships, some were working. We would just all come, sit down, crack jokes, play ping pong, play like other, whatever board games. So I got lucky there, to have a friend who was like, hey, just stay with us, because it was getting too much. I was spending all my money just in tolls and, commuting.
Right.
But yeah, that was my first job at Dr. Reddy's as an internship. But then again, it was in reg affairs, and it was a great learning experience to see how the regulatory filings are done. So Dr. Reddy,
Mm-hmm.
being a generic company, they were doing ANDAs, which is the abbreviated new drug
New
applications.
drug
So
applications. Yeah.
so we were doing some of those, and reviewing and compiling dossiers and making sure all the documents are correct, and doing some applications with the different states within
Mm-hmm.
US. So that was a good learning experience, but again, it wasn't something I wanted to do for the remaining of my career, and
Mm-hmm.
which is how I moved more into QA and quality after that job, because I realized that reg affairs was not something I really wanted to be in.
Yeah. Okay. So before we move towards the more technical part of the podcast, talking about GXP and compliances and everything, I just want to ask one more thing. How did you find the career different in pharmacy in abroad countries or like in states versus the pharmacy career in India? Because you told that you have done some of the internships in India as well during your bachelor's degree.
Yep.
So how's the career different? And even you have friends out in India as well, and everywhere. So how do you find the career is different in both the countries?
Yeah, I would say that one of the main differences is just the style of teaching, right? So in India, it's I don't, again, I don't want to say that's how it is today, because I don't really know how it is today, but I'm talking about how it was at the time when I was in school. It was more textbook oriented, and
Mhm.
you know you were expected to basically memorize or know everything that was in the book, right? There were some teachers who pushed your uh, you know brain buttons to make you think a little bit different, but for the most part it was more like textbook oriented.
Okay.
And another big difference is, obviously, because India's population, you would have a class that is a big, 100, sometimes 90 to 100 people in a class, whereas when I came to US, it was like 40 people in a class, or maybe 25 or 30 in a master's program. So that's also, the teacher to student ratio is one thing. The style of teaching is another thing. And also in India, when you're doing exams and tests, you're expected to write like lengthy, essays and stuff. Whereas when I came to US, it was more like multiple choice questions, and you had to really think, and answer those questions. Or maybe you had to just do a presentation and you were graded on how you did the presentation. So I would say those are some of the differences, just the style of teaching, the style of exams and being graded, and just
Mhm.
the ratio of teacher to the student. I think those are the three big ones that I noticed.
Okay. Okay. So now let's move towards more technicalities. I want to know from an expert of GXP, if you're explaining it to a B Farm first year student or a person who is planning to do pharmacy and pursue career in pharmacy, what would you tell a tiny student of that level? What is GXP according to you?
Yeah, so what I would say is that GxP is basically an umbrella term, and it stands for a set of guidelines or regulatory guidelines. And the intention of these guidelines is to make sure that all the life science companies are making products that are safe, for products that have good quality, and products that are safe for the patients, and also the data that's being generated throughout the life cycle of creating that product, from the day one where it's found in a lab to the day when it's out in the market or in a hospital or a pharmacy shelf. There's a lot of data that's generated from start to finish. So all that data has to have the integrity. It has to be accurate and legitimate, all of that. So I would say GxP is just an umbrella term. When you break it down and replace the X with a, let's say, GMP, so that stands for good manufacturing practices. And as it as you hear that, you immediately know, okay, so that means it's a set of regulatory guidelines that are for manufacturing. And if you are doing manufacturing of a product, then you have to make sure that you're following the GMP guidelines. And then these are all written by FDA, in the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. So you can go and read what these guidelines are. And there's many others. So there's GCP, which is good clinical practices. Now, that's again more if you're in the clinical phase, you're doing clinical trials. What sort of regulations do you need to follow? What's the responsibility of the sponsor, which is the company that's running the trial? What are the rights of the patients who are enrolled in the trial? And what are the roles and responsibilities of the investigators or sub-investigators? So these are medical providers or physicians who are actually monitoring the trial. So in a clinical trial, there's a lot of stakeholders involved,
Mhm.
and GCP, basically tells you what each person's or each group's responsibility is. So you can go
Right.
on and break it down. There's like
Mhm.
7 or 8 others. There's good
Right.
laboratory practices. There is, good documentation practices. But GxP is an umbrella term that everyone
Right.
uses
Mhm.
for a set of these regulations.
Okay. So my next question would be, what is the significance of GXP? Why there's such a big hype about compliance and GXP guidelines and everything in the pharmaceutical and any other life science companies or industry, I would say rather.
Yeah, I would say that. So again, going back to what I said for the GXP is that when you look at the expectations from the regulatory agencies like the FDA, right? So the
Mhm.
FDA really cares about patient safety,
Right.
because they don't want to approve a drug that is not safe for the patient. So they are basically looking at the risk benefit ratio of that drug. So, what is the risk if a person takes this drug, and what is the benefit, and does the benefit outweigh the risks, or is this person going to have some sort of adverse reaction or some severe reaction? So the FDA's main focus is to protect public health, it's to protect patient safety, uh,
Mhm.
and to do that, there are certain FDA has given out certain guidelines to pharmaceutical, biotech, and other life science companies to say, hey, if you follow these GxP guidelines, it's not guaranteed that you will have the best quality product, but you will be on that track, right? So if you follow these, there is a high probability that you will be having a good quality product, which will be safe for the patients, and you will also be capturing all the right data that you can use in your regulatory submissions or filings or whatnot. So I would say the main focus on GxP is because it is uh, following GxP gives you sort of that blueprint that, hey,
Mhm.
if you do these things, irrespective of whether you are a pharma or a biotech or whatever company you are, those are timeless requirements that apply to different industries, and they've been written long time ago and they haven't changed much because they still apply today, right? So
Right.
I would say that's why the focus is so much on GxP. And majority of the companies in US focus on FDA, but there are other regulatory agencies in the world that have their own variation of quote unquote GxP requirements, right? So
Yeah.
depending on where you're marketing your product or where you're selling, you have to follow even those in addition to the US FDA. So I think the focus is more because it is a blueprint to ensure patient safety, to make sure that you have a good quality product, and to also make sure that the data that you're using has the integrity. And I think that's why there's so much focus on companies to follow GxP or be compliant with GxP regulations.
Okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong here in understanding what you're trying to explain. Like, I've been working in pharmacovigilance from past 5 years, and
Hmm.
I have been chased by everybody, my colleagues, my friends, doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals I know here around me in my city itself. That what work you do in pharmacovigilance? Why is it even required? So, I've been telling them back to back that there is something called patient safety, which is very important,
Hmm.
which is very unknown, of course, not in only in India, but in other countries also. I see that people are less aware about pharmacovigilance. So I used to think the risk benefit ratio analysis is the only thing that we do, but you're
Yeah.
making it sound that GxP is actually originally based on this patient safety concept. We are designing the drug, we are manufacturing the drug, and documenting everything regarding the drug in such a manner that ultimately our patient remains safe. We don't
Yep.
want to cause any life-threatening or fatal disorders to the patient. Is that it? Is that the
Yeah.
major reason why we have GxP in place in our pharmaceutical industries and others like life sciences industries as well?
Yeah. I would say that you know the amount or the extent of the GxP requirements that a company or a team needs to follow really depends on which phase of drug development you're in, right? So if you're
Right.
way early, like in preclinical, which some of the companies that we work with in consulting, they don't care about GMP requirements in preclinical because they are not ready to file, a drug product for approval. They know they need to follow GMP, but they're so early in the stage that they're not putting their efforts in there. And this is something that I observed a lot of times with companies is from day one they want to do all of the GxP, and that's also not a good way to operate because you're spending too much time doing following requirements, creating documents that don't really serve the purpose, right? So if you're in the early stages like preclinical or clinical, you're going to have to follow more of the GLP, GCP requirements until you're ready to go into manufacturing. Then you're going to follow the GMP, and then pharmacovigilance also has its place, in finding the drug safety or safety parameters or identifying all of those. So I would say the biggest thing is that for companies is to understand which phase of the life cycle they are in the drug development, and which GXPs they need to follow for that phase. That's where they should put like more of their effort. And as they go from preclinical to commercial, at one point they have to follow everything, which is when they're
Right.
near commercial, that's when everything becomes important, because now you are actually putting it out in the product out in the market. So I would say, yeah,
Um,
there is a focus on all the areas, but it's more up and down in the start, and then all the levels become the same as you go towards commercial.
okay. You mentioned a term, Code of Federal Regulation. I guess
Yeah.
21 CFR Part 11 is the one that is more about what the drugs need to be made in which manner, the GMP, GLP guideline, all the GxP majorly. Could you explain what the CFR is and what it says?
Yeah, so the one you mentioned, actually, the CFR Part 11, that's more around electronic records and electronic signatures.
That's the
And
only one I've
that's,
read actually
yeah, yeah,
regarding
yeah. So
pharmacovigilance. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's more for computerized systems or paper records,
Mhm.
or or actually not paper records, but computerized systems and electronic records, and also the electronic signatures that are used in computerized systems. So Part 11 is more towards that. But in terms of GMP, GLP, and GCP, you have 21 CFR Part 210, 211. You have Part 58. So there's different regulations, but the code of federal regulations, the way I understand, and again, I'm not 100% sure, but there's a set of it applies to many different industries, right?
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
different domains, because it's food and drugs, so there are
Food
some
and
in
drugs.
there that apply to food as well.
Food as well. Yeah.
But the ones that apply to the drug, or are these. And then there's like 820, for example, CFR 820. That's more for medical devices.
Okay.
So that's the CFR 820 is for medical devices. But for GMP and GCP and GLP, there's 210, 211, Part 58. And then there's also other guidelines, like I mentioned, for GCP, there's ICH guidelines that also need to be followed in addition to FDA GCP guidelines. So yeah, I would say those are the few common ones that I am aware of.
Okay. So now it moves towards talking about your company because I'm very curious how it came into process. So tell us something about your company, Qualtivate. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Qualtivate,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so Cultivate is a quality management and technology management consulting company for
Mhm.
early stage or mid stage biotech life science companies, and basically we help with all aspects of quality management. So things like designing a QMS or building a quality management system, doing audits or quality assurance review or oversight of different records or different departments or whatever. And that's all of that happens more in the QA function. We also do some gap assessments for companies where they want us to look at their process and give them a assessment as to how which requirements are they complying with and which ones they're not, where there are any gaps. So all of these kind of services fall under the quality management umbrella. And then when you go to the other side of what we do, which is the technology management, that's where we help companies implement computerized systems. So since you're in pharmacovigilance, you're probably familiar with Argus Safety, used for drug
Yeah.
safety or other drug safety tools. So we do the validation, software development, validation, lifecycle testing, auditing the vendors, software vendors, data management, maybe helping companies implement like AI or no code or some automation to integrate different systems. So all of those services fall under technology management, and then the other ones are under quality management. So that's what we do as a consulting company.
Okay. So, what is the story behind developing the company? Like you said, pharmacy was never a plan. I'm sure you're going
Yep.
to say that the company was also never a plan. Earlier, you were doing different jobs in very great companies. I've seen your profile on LinkedIn. So, having these many years of experience, what you learned from your job life, and then what was the point that hit you and you decided that no, I want to now build my own company? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, I think the main driver of starting the company was just to have the opportunity to work with work on multiple different projects and different challenges at the same time. So when you're an employee, oftentimes you tend to work on maybe a portion of a project or something that's assigned to you, right? Like if you're in a smaller startup, you might get to do a lot of things. But as you
Mhm.
go into mid-size and bigger companies, your role is pretty much defined, and you really cannot do more than your role, even if you might do a little bit, right? But at the end of the day, your job responsibilities are more defined. And uh, for me, I felt like I was doing much better in terms of fulfilling my curiosity when I had, changing jobs every 3 months or 6 months, or like finding new stuff. So, like, I did consulting for 6 years from 2012 to 2018. And that's where, like, every 6 months or 1 year, I was just working on different projects, and it was always like changing. I could never just say, okay, this is my job, because 6 months later, it could be something else. But then when I moved into full time, it wasn't like that. It was more like, okay, this is your job, and that's, you'll do something different here and there, but more or less you're doing this for as long as you, and you get some additional responsibilities like managing a team and all that as you get promoted. Uh, but my main driver to start Cultivate was just to get to work with different types of companies, different size of companies, different projects. We work with some companies in US, some in India, some in Canada. Also have talked to some clients in Australia. They all have similar problems, but their style and way of working is different. And that's what excites me, because I get to have the advantage of LinkedIn and reach out to these people and get to work with them. So I'm still doing the same job, but it's just that there's more variety and it keeps me on my toes. So I like that about consulting.
Okay. So, although you've already talked about it, but I just want to get elaboration on the fact about what are the services you provide at Qualtivate, like regarding quality management system and about the auditing purposes and everything. What all things do you provide other than consulting and all?
Yeah, so we one of the primary service that we provide, that we've done a lot of work for, is helping early stage companies set up their quality management system. So we help them write all the documentation, all the policies, forms, and templates to set up their QMS based on whichever therapeutic area or what type of company it is, what regulations or certifications they're aiming for. So we spend a lot of time designing all of that. And if they want to move to electronic QMS, we also help them implement electronic QMS softwares. So we're partnered with some of the top electronic QMS software companies in life sciences, and
Mhm.
based on our client need, we'll also help them with that implementation. So that's one of our core services. We do a lot of software audits, GMP audits, GLP audits, depending on our client needs. So, auditing is another area where we've done at least 5 projects since starting in 2022.
Okay.
And some companies also outsource all of their auditing to us. So, it's not one audit. It's not like, hey, I need you just to do one audit. It's like, hey, these are all my systems, these are all my suppliers, can you go and create a schedule and then go and audit all of them in 12 months or 15 months? And then we
Okay.
take all of it and we plan the entire schedule and audit all of them. Uh, those, and then we also, like I mentioned, we do gap assessment. This is more for companies who might have got a finding or some kind of observation from an internal audit or external audit that they're not complying with certain requirements. So then they need help revising their documents to make sure that all those gaps are addressed. Or in some cases, maybe a company is getting acquired by a bigger pharma company, and they are tasked with doing the assessment so that they can update or align their procedures to the bigger company that's acquiring them. So we get some projects like that where they basically want us to review their documents and provide them feedback on what the gaps are. So those are all the main services under quality that we do. And then on the technology side, we implement computer system validation. So any GxP system. So like I mentioned, at under the GxP, there's GMP, there's GLP, there's pharmacovigilance. So all of these areas you can either do manually or you can use an electronic system. And if you
Right.
use an electronic system, then computer system validation regulations apply to it, which is Part 11, electronic records and electronic signatures. So that's the main one for CSV. So we've done systems like for example, in clinical trials, you have clinical trial management system, or ETMF, like managing the trial master file. If you're talking about pharmacovigilance, you have a drug safety software like Argus or Oracle or whichever others. If you're talking manufacturing, you might have manufacturing execution software, or if you're in the labs, you have LIMS. So there's a whole range of computer system software that's used in life sciences, and all of that has to be validated, tested, documented. So we do all of that for companies. We create that entire set of documentation for them. And then data integrity and data management is kind of tied a little bit with CSV, because if you have a computer system, you are creating electronic data, right? Like it's
Right.
common sense that that's what you're doing. But how do you maintain the integrity of that data? What kind of audit trails you have? What are which users have access to that data? What permissions do they have? And how are you making sure that that data doesn't get changed or falsified or whatever? Like, you have to maintain different checks and balances and understand the data flow. So those are on the computer system side and validation side. Those are some of the ones. And then the last one I would say is, we also help companies implement additional technologies like AI or no code on top of their existing systems. So if they want, let's say some analytics or dashboards or something of that nature, then if we can get access to their computer system where the data is, we can take that data, use AI, and show it to them in a visual interface or a dashboard, or we can automate some of that and send it from one system to another system. So that comes in the AI and automation side of things. But I would say these are the 6 or 7 that we've pretty much done since we started day one.
Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. So, what's your mission at your company? Wow, I mean, like you're so passionate when you're talking about Qualtivate and looking at the culture of hashtags. Nowadays, we merge two words and we make a single one. So, what I can decode from the company name, it's actually like something cultivating quality. Are you trying to make cultivate and quality? So you merged it and you made Qualtivate. Is it something like that? I'm just guessing. So,
Yes,
what's
yeah.
your mission from that? Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And
Okay.
the
That was
idea
a
the
wild
I
guess, but yeah.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
So that's exactly right. The company name is a combination of the word cultivate and quality. Uh, and the idea essentially is to not think of quality as a one-time task or an event, right? Or something that's only responsibility of one person or one department. Because the way I think about quality is that everything a company does has a component that impacts quality. And if you are a quality manager or director of quality, you have to have the understanding of what that component is, so you can make sure that if you devote your attention to it, then overall quality is not getting impacted, right? So that's why we try to uh, you know and let's say if you're designing a SOP or you're writing a document, so
Mhm.
you might say, okay, how can this impact quality? Well, one way it can impact quality is if that SOP is not clear, or if people don't train on it and they do based on their, if it's open to interpretation and they feel like, oh, in my last job I did this, so I think that's what this means, I'll just do that. Then now you're introducing variability, because I might do the same task slightly differently and you will do it slightly differently. We will
Right.
still meet the SOP because it doesn't tell us that one thing that we are doing different. But then down the line, we feel like, oh, why these two are showing separate results, right?
Right.
So the idea is just to look for these different elements in each area, whether it's your computer system, whether it's training your employees, whether it's writing SOPs, trying to understand which elements impact quality in these different areas, and then helping the companies make it slightly better, depending on what the project is. So that was the vision, or the mission for starting the company, is just to find diff 1%, make it 1% better by finding these areas, and eventually that will help the overall quality become better.
Wow, that was deep.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's talk about your YouTube channel. When did you decide to come to YouTube, and why is the name Life Science 360? And what is the channel all about?
Yeah, so the channel I started in early 2023, in January 2023, and I started Cultivate in 2022. And it was, again, it wasn't planned. It was mainly just like, okay, so the idea was, as I started Cultivate, I was talking to a lot of different people in the industry, whether it was them reaching out to me to say, hey, oh, you're a consultant, I need your help with this project, can you help me? Or I posted something on LinkedIn and they would message me and say, oh, I love what you said. Or people would even message me and say, I disagree with what you said, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Like
Oh,
there's all those kind of reactions as well, right? It's not easy to be a creator because you have to take, when somebody tells you like, oh wow, I agree with you, like it feels good. But if five people say it and one person disagrees with you, it brings you down quickly, right? And
yes.
again, so the idea was, as I'm talking to all these people and getting all these feedback, I was talking to potential clients, and understanding their pain points. I was always recording those meetings or taking notes. And I felt like I'm already going to these 20 or 30-minute meetings and talking to
Right.
these people. Why not put this, on YouTube, or put it as a podcast and cut out the confidential parts and then let other
Right.
people also listen to this,
Hmm.
and maybe it will help them.
Yeah.
Because I was more like learning these topics from clients, like, oh, why do you do it this way, or what's so special about this, or you're asking them interesting questions. So that's how I started. uh, and oftentimes I would just love to talk to people who have done something that I don't know anything about for that topic. So for example, let's say I don't know anything about investing in biotech companies or how that thing works, but I know somebody on LinkedIn who is a really good investor, or has invested millions of dollars and has a company that does that. So there the intention is not like, oh, this is my potential client. There the intention is, I'm a student, you are an expert, like, teach me how this works. And if I were to start today, if I had $1,000 to invest, how should I start, right? So like, so there's different reasons with each podcast guest as to how I channel those questions and how I ask them. And that's how I started in 2023. I posted a lot of episodes. The people I interviewed first were the ones that were engaging with my content, and they were supporting me. Like, I said, okay, I'm new at this, I need to learn how to interview and figure out, so can you help and come on my podcast? And slowly, as I did the first 10 or 15 interviews, then I started, having more better luck at getting bigger guests, or companies were reaching out to me and say, hey, we want to feature our company on your podcast, so can you, set up an interview, or can you ask these questions, because we want to talk about this topic. So now it's getting more fun because now the guests are coming from, different angles,
Okay.
versus me trying to, cherry pick and find the people. uh, I'm still figuring out the whole YouTube side of things. I I didn't know how technical and how much detail is involved in putting a YouTube video. And just things like having your camera angle or your audio, your video, the post production, the editing. There's a lot of things that need to happen, and
Right.
I didn't think about any of those when I first started in 2023. But now my focus is just to learn and make sure that there's some branding or consistency in the quality of each video. So yeah,
Right.
it's still amazing. It's just something that I like to do. On I like to talk to people, so uh yeah, I put it out there every week.
Your passion for quality comes out when I look at your videos on YouTube. Even your small clips are so fruitful. Just listening to a tiny clip for 60 seconds gives me an idea of what you think about the profession, how much deeply you are loving the profession of pharmacy. So, before we end the podcast, I just want to ask you what would be your message to the budding pharmacist, to people who are doing graduation or post graduation or PhDs in pharmacy currently, and to a person who's a fresher but is very upset about the initial salary that they're getting here in India or in any of the countries. Because I would say in India, the pharmacy profession or the pharmacists are given a little lesser title than the doctors and physicians, which impacts the salary range as well. But
Hmm.
it's an inevitable profession, I would say. In inevitable industry, we cannot survive, the society cannot function without medicines, and the people who manufacture, research, develop and sell medicines, right? So what is your message to budding pharmacists, how they should think of their profession, how they should fall in love with their pharmacy career just like you did, and how can they become as successful as you one day?
Yeah, so I would say that so you asked about pharmacists, and what was the first part of your question? You asked about also
Yeah, I was
freshers
asking
and
about, yes,
yeah.
freshers and all the graduate, postgraduate students
Yep.
currently who are pursuing their degree. They are also hearing from their colleagues, their friends, their seniors in college that you have not chosen a good degree. You're not in the best program or degree course. You should have gone for something
Mm,
else. This is the feedback they get from their teachers in the school or from their seniors who are passing out. So
right,
from the
right.
very first year itself, this becomes a thought process, and the mindset becomes very low about their own career, their own profession. They've stopped looking at the greener side or what the positive side can be, and stopped thinking about what can be done in their profession, and they're just listening to what has been told. It's all about hear and say. They're not
Yep,
looking through their own eyes. So
yep.
what's your message for people like that?
Yeah, so I would say that there isn't there's always going to be uh few careers that have a high demand in a particular decade. And once you pass that decade, or you pass whatever, it becomes like, oh, it starts fading away, right? And then new careers emerge. So now in the next 10, 20 years, there will be a lot of new careers in data analytics, AI. But 20 years ago, nobody cared about those careers because there was no need for them. But now in the next 10, 20 years, we have already seen a lot of universities in US have AI programs like certificate in AI or things like that. Why? Because everybody, that is the demand. That is what people want with those kind of skills. So I would say that look at pharmacy as a not as the only degree that you can use to get a job, but look at it as a foundation, and what can you add on top of it to make the impact better. If you just do pharmacy and say, okay, I'm a pharmacy graduate, I need a job, there's 100 other people with the same degree, right? So you're basically competing with them. So what can you add on top of that pharmacy degree to make it better? Maybe you can add a certification in technology. Maybe you can start creating content on LinkedIn or YouTube, and then now you're almost like a pharmacist but also a content creator, right? So try to look at pharmacy as one piece of the puzzle, but see what else you can add, because otherwise it will be a one dimensional profile where you just are a pharmacist and there are many others like you, and you haven't really added. And then comes the question, what should you add, right? So I'm not saying you should go and post YouTube videos. Maybe you don't like looking at a camera. Maybe you don't like doing that. So you have to really figure out, like, what else can I add to the pharmacy foundation that can help me get better opportunities and that can help me stand out, because there will be fewer people with exactly that you know skills or interdisciplinary skills. So that's how I would look at pharmacy, and think of adding those extra layers, and then getting jobs and getting opportunities where you can use those layers, right? So if you're a pharmacist working for a company or pharmacy in India, maybe you can tell them, hey, I'm also interested in creating content. Maybe you can create content for that company. Now you all of a sudden become more valuable to that company, because other pharmacists cannot do that. They just know
Right.
pharmacy, but you know something more. So I posted on LinkedIn a similar thing around quality, because many people ask me, oh, if I come into quality, what should I do? It's very low pay and I'm not getting anything. I said, if you're coming into quality, you should learn more about the other departments in your first 2 or 3 or 5 years. Learn as much as you can. So
Mhm.
still do your job, but learn about how manufacturing works. Learn about how technology works. Learn about how clinical studies are done. So just ask people or try to tell them, hey, what's your job? Go for lunch with your employees, ask them, hey, Mitali, what do you do in pharmacovigilance? Can you explain? I'm not saying go and do their job, but just be open to learning from them. And the more you learn, the more you start becoming different than other people. So that's the same concept I was used for anybody who is in the pharmacy, is just try to add on some other skills to your you know to your profile.
Okay. This was supposed to be the last question, but now I have one more popped up in
Sure,
my
go
mind
ahead.
because you used the word AI. So now I have to ask you, with so many years of experience, you've seen the backside of the industry. You can see the fore side of the industry as well. What is going to happen in the next decade, 10 to 15 years down the line? How AI is going to impact the entire pharmaceutical industry? What do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, so the simple answer is that AI is going to become as necessary as having internet. So
Mhm.
when 20 or 30 years ago, maybe, at least when I was growing up, I did not have a laptop where I could open and write a LinkedIn post or a YouTube video. I would have to pay 10, 15 rupees to go to a cafe and sit there and log on to internet, right? So if anybody can
Right.
relate to those times, but now it is very easy for me to log on to the internet. As long as I have a phone or a laptop with a Wi-Fi, I mean, I can say whatever I want and reach anybody in the world. Start getting there. So AI is going to become that uh, integrated in our lives, and in our roles, whether we like it or not. It's going to happen. There is no other way, at least from where I see it. So as a professional, you have two options. A, you say that, okay, I will wait until it happens and
Mhm.
then figure out what I want to do. Or you can just start learning of what's happening and be ready, so that you stay a little bit ahead of that. So I would say, don't be afraid of AI as something that's going to take your job. It's not. It's going to complement your skills, and maybe your job responsibilities will change a little bit, because now you have to integrate AI somewhere in your job. But at the end of the day, one thing we know that AI will maybe not able to do is have that human connection, have the emotion, have that critical thinking skills. Thinking maybe it will do, but the other parts, it's not. It's
It
still a
cannot.
technology, right? So it cannot do.
Right.
So I would try to focus on those parts and build those relationships, with your employees or with your clients. And also, be ready for AI. Don't think of it like it's AI versus me. No, it's not that. It's going to impact every job. Some jobs will get obsolete, and that's what happens. But then very new jobs also get created. But in pharma, I think because we are using so much data in the life cycle of the drug, AI is going to help us massively in uh, gathering all of this data in one place, processing all of that data into insights so that we can learn faster, like what's happening in clinical trials, what's happening in manufacturing. AI is going to help, get all that data processed really faster and help us, look at insights so we can solve a problem before it becomes into something bigger, right? Proactively solve that problem. So I think that's what AI is going to do to the pharma and life sciences industry. And yeah, I don't have all the answers, but I'm always just like others. I'm learning, I'm trying to understand where the impact is, what's happening. And that's what I would say to anyone who is also in life sciences, is to be open to learning.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking out time for us and for my audience at the Pharma Daily.
Yep.
I just don't want to stop listening. I don't want to end the podcast because there is so much that you are talking about, and I want to keep learning and hearing to you. But we have time limits, and I know how precious your time is. So I would end our first podcast over here, and fingers crossed, looking
Yep.
towards more and more podcasts together with you. If you have time in future, I would schedule more podcasts with you prior, a month or two prior, and then I would chase you again for a few more gatherings like these so that me and my audience can learn a lot from you. So thank you for making out time today. And yeah, that's it. I'd
Yeah.
stop
Thank you.
recording now. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks again. Thanks again for inviting. It was a pleasure talking to you. And yeah, if any of your audience has any questions or they want to connect with me, just find me on LinkedIn and shoot me a message. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
And guys, also Sir has a YouTube channel of his own. So do go
Yep.
and subscribe and follow him on Life Sciences 360 and hear out his insights, which are really valuable. I follow his channel and I get overwhelmed every time with every new clip and video that he is posting out. So yeah. Okay,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.